My eyes were still closed, but my soul was wide awake. I could hear every whisper, every cruel intention hidden behind their careful words. The room smelled of medicine, disinfectant, and betrayal. It's strange. The body can fail, but the heart? The heart hears things long before the brain understands them. When the nurse said those words, "She can hear you," a drop of warmth ran through my numb chest. Not hope, no, not yet, but something like a reminder I was still alive. And as long as I was alive, I had the right to the truth. The footsteps around my bed shifted quickly. I could almost feel the panic in the air. Martin wasn't used to being questioned, especially not by someone who wasn't afraid of him. He cleared his throat, pretending to be the worried husband. "We were only discussing her care," he said, stumbling over his own lie. The woman beside him, yes, his lover, though he never had the courage to admit it, took a step back. I could smell her perfume. Sweet. Cheap. The kind that pretends to be expensive. The nurse wasn't fooled. Her voice sharpened. Her vitals are stable. She's not dying. And you don't get to decide anything without her consent. Without my consent. Funny, isn't it? After 40 years of marriage, Martin had taken everything without asking. My youth, my peace, my trust, my dreams. But now, lying helpless on this bed, I realized that he wanted one more thing, my death. So he could live freely with another woman. So he could erase me like I was nothing more than a chapter he was tired of reading. Warm tears gathered in the corners of my closed eyes but never fell. I didn't want them to. Tears make you weak. And I had already been too weak, too blind, too trusting for too many years. The nurse came closer. I felt her gentle fingers on my wrist, checking my pulse, then her warm breath near my ear as she whispered very softly, "If you can hear me, blink." My heart pounded. I gathered everything left inside me, every drop of strength, and I blinked. Once. Slowly. Purposefully. The nurse gasped quietly. Her fingers trembled. "She's responsive," she said under her breath. But I heard the excitement, the relief, the fierce protectiveness. And for the first time in months, someone was on my side. Martin rushed forward, pretending to be emotional. "Helen? Honey? Can you hear me?" His voice was shaking, but not with love, with fear. Fear of me waking up. Fear of his secrets falling apart. Fear of being exposed in front of the staff. Every fake syllable cut deeper than a knife. I wanted to scream, "Get away from me, Martin. Get away before I remind you of every lie you ever told me." But my lips wouldn't move. My body was still a prisoner. Only my mind was free. The lover placed her hand on his arm and whispered, "We should go. The doctor will come soon." Oh yes, they should go. They should both go to the hell they built together. The nurse stood firm. "You two need to step outside," she said firmly. "Now." Their footsteps moved away. The door clicked. Silence settled like a warm blanket on my chest. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe. The nurse pulled a chair close to my bed and sat beside me. "You're safe," she whispered. "You're not alone. I'm here." And I heard everything. A single tear finally escaped my eye. Not from pain, but from relief. Relief that someone had finally seen the truth I'd been hiding for years. She squeezed my hand. "Blink if you want to tell me something." And with every ounce of strength in my failing body, I blinked again. The nurse stayed beside me long after Martin and his mistress left the room. Her presence felt like a warm light in a place that had grown cold with betrayal. For years I had carried the weight of silence, swallowing my pain like bitter medicine, believing that loyalty meant endurance. But now, lying helpless yet awake, I realized that silence only feeds the wolves. And in my life, the wolf had always worn the face of the man I once loved. The nurse leaned closer, her voice soft but firm. "If something is wrong, if someone hurt you, blink twice." I tried to lift my fingers, but they lay still like stones. So I obeyed her gentle instruction and blinked twice. Slowly, painfully, but clearly. She inhaled sharply and nodded, as if she had expected my answer but still wished it weren't true. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'm going to help you. Help me." Such a simple promise, yet something I hadn't heard from anyone in years. I had always been the helper, the wife who cooked, cleaned, forgave, waited, endured, and prayed. But who had ever helped me? Certainly not Martin. As the nurse adjusted the 4-drip, memories began to flood me. Not like a gentle stream, but like a storm breaking the doors open. I remembered the first time I suspected the other woman. The late nights. The sudden phone calls. The faint lipstick stains he claimed were from a coworker's cheek. I remembered asking him softly, "Is there someone else?" And how easily he had laughed, brushing aside my fears like one brushes away dust on a table. "Helen, you overthink," he'd said, kissing my forehead as if his lips could erase the truth. But truth doesn't erase. It hides. It waits. It burns. And eventually it shows itself in the ugliest ways, like hearing your husband planning your funeral with another woman while you're still breathing. The door opened again, and for a moment my heart sank, fearing that Martin had returned. But it was the doctor, followed by 2 nurses. They spoke softly at first, checking my monitor, reading the chart, whispering medical terms I couldn't fully understand. But then the main nurse, the one who had defended me, told them everything she heard. Their faces changed. Something shifted in the room. Suddenly I wasn't just a patient. I was a woman in danger. The doctor came closer and spoke with gentleness, like someone talking to a fragile soul. "Helen, if you can hear me, you're stronger than you look. We're going to take care of you. But we need to keep certain people away for now. Blink if you agree." I didn't just blink. I forced every ounce of strength in me and blinked hard. One of the younger nurses gasped. "She's fully responsive," she whispered. The doctor nodded. "She understands everything." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt seen, understood, protected. They told me they would monitor my condition closely, that they would keep Martin out until they were sure I wasn't under psychological stress. Psychological stress. If only they knew how many years of quiet suffering I had survived. When they left, the main nurse, her name tag read Nora, pulled her chair even closer. "Do you know that man is dangerous for you?" she asked quietly. I blinked once to say yes. Nora sighed heavily. "I saw the way he looked at you earlier. Not like a husband. Not like someone who cares." Her voice trembled with anger. "Some people forget that love is a promise, not a possession." A promise. Martin had broken that promise long before I realized it. Maybe I always knew. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. After 50 years together, your heart becomes blind in the places where memory is soft. I could hear her pen scratching on a clipboard as she documented everything for the record. "We'll make sure he can't hurt you," she said. "Not physically, not emotionally, not through manipulation." Hours passed. Machines beeped softly. The sun outside turned orange, then purple. Night settled like a blanket over the hospital. But inside me something was waking up. A voice. A strength. A clarity I hadn't felt in decades. Because when a woman survives a lifetime of quiet heartbreak, something inside her eventually rises. Stronger, sharper, unbreakable. And as I lay there under the dim hospital light, one truth became painfully clear. Martin wasn't planning to bury my body. He was trying to bury my existence. But he had forgotten something he once loved about me. I have never been easy to bury. That night, when the hospital halls grew quiet and only distant footsteps echoed like soft ghosts, I lay awake, listening to the slow rhythm of machines that reminded me I was still alive. Alive enough to feel every shard of betrayal cutting inside me. The darkness made everything sharper. The cold air touched my skin like memory, and my mind slipped back to moments I had avoided for years. People say the truth hurts, but they forget to say that remembering hurts even more. And as I stared at the ceiling, unable to move but fully awake, I remembered everything. I remembered the first time Martin held my hand at 22, promising the world. I remembered the nights we sat on the porch watching the moon rise, the way he whispered my name like a man who couldn't live without me. I remembered the children we dreamed of but never had. I remembered the empty rocking chair that stayed in our home for years, waiting for someone who never came. That empty chair had always bothered me. Now I wondered if it had bothered him too, but for a different reason. Not because we had no child, but because I was the only thing left tying him down. I was the last piece of our old life. The last reminder of promises he no longer wanted to keep. A faint sound pulled me back into the present. The soft click of the door opening. For a moment fear strangled me. I thought it was Martin again. But it was Nora, carrying a blanket over her arm. She walked in silently, like a guardian angel who worked the night shift. You're still awake, she whispered, noticing my eyes moving. She gently draped the warm blanket over me, smoothing the edges as though I were her own grandmother. No one had done that for me in years. Your heartbeat went up earlier, she said. Did something scare you? If only blinking could tell stories. I blinked once, slow and heavy, and she nodded like she understood far more than I could say. She sat down beside me again. You know, I've seen a lot of marriages, she murmured. Some filled with love, some filled with lies. But the worst ones, the ones that haunt me, are the marriages where one partner stops seeing the other as human. Her words pressed against my heart like a weight. Had Martin stopped seeing me as human? Maybe long ago. Nora took my hand, her fingers warm against my cold skin. Tomorrow morning we're moving you to a private wing, she said. Restricted access. Only medical staff allowed until you can speak again. And until then you don't need to worry. Worry. If only she knew how many years of my life I had wasted worrying. About his moods, his absences, his excuses, his smell when he came home late. A woman always knows the scent of betrayal. It lingers longer than perfume. As the night grew deeper, Nora left to check on other patients, but not before turning back to whisper, "You're stronger than you think." Her voice followed me into my dreams, which were not dreams at all. More like pieces of memory drifting in and out. I saw Martin laughing with that woman. I saw her touching his arm in the same way I used to. I saw the way he looked at her as if she was everything he had ever wanted. It hurt, not because he loved her but because he had once looked at me that way. The cruelest wounds are the ones made by someone who once held your heart gently. Hours later, just before dawn, the door opened again. This time the air changed immediately. Heavy. Sharp. Familiar. Martin. He slipped inside quietly, hoping no one would notice. The woman wasn't with him. Perhaps she was waiting somewhere else, planning the life they would have after I was gone. He approached my bed, thinking I was still unconscious. His voice was low, annoyed, almost angry. "Helen, you weren't supposed to wake up." The words sliced through the dim room like a blade. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my eyelids still. He leaned closer, his breath brushing my cheek. "You should have just gone peacefully," he whispered. "Now everything is complicated." Complicated? My death was supposed to be convenient for him. He brushed a strand of hair away from my face, and for a moment I saw the man I married. Or maybe it was just habit, my heart playing tricks. But then he sighed, frustrated, his real voice leaking out like poison. "You don't even know what you've ruined." And at that moment I felt something shift inside me. Something deep. Something final. I wasn't afraid of dying. But I was terrified I might die unheard. And that, I decided, would never happen. When Martin leaned over me that dawn, whispering words meant only for the dying, something inside me broke. Not softly, not quietly, but with the force of a lifetime of ignored pain. I had spent years believing that if I just loved him enough, if I stayed calm enough, if I forgave him enough, he would come back to the man he used to be. The man who held my hand at the bus station. The man who wiped my tears the night my mother died. The man who danced with me in the kitchen to music only we could hear. But now, hearing him speak about my death as if it were an inconvenience, I finally understood something I had refused to accept. That man was long gone. And the one standing beside my bed wasn't my husband. He was a stranger wearing my memories like a mask. I kept my eyelids heavy, pretending to be unconscious. If he knew I could hear him, he might panic. He might do something desperate. He might try to make his wish come true before the staff came back. I could feel his eyes scanning my face, searching for any sign of movement. My heart raced so fast the monitor beeped loudly, betraying me. He jerked back, startled, glancing at the door. "Damn it," he hissed. "You're going to ruin everything. Ruin everything by living." How strange, how cruel, how ridiculous that my survival was an inconvenience to the man who once vowed to protect me. Suddenly, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Martin stiffened. The door handle moved. He straightened his shirt and stepped away from my bed just as Nora walked in. Her sharp eyes immediately scanned the room, landing on him like a detective who already knew the answer. "Visiting hours are over," she said, her tone flat but laced with warning. Martin forced a smile, the same fake one he used on Neighbors when lying about our happy marriage. I just came to check on my wife. Nora didn't flinch. You shouldn't be here, she repeated. Please leave. The day passed slowly. Nurses came and went. They treated me not as a dying patient but as a living story, one they wanted to protect. But by nightfall, exhaustion wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. I drifted in and out of sleep, hearing soft murmurs from the hallway. At one point, I heard two nurses whispering about Martin trying to get information about my room number. Nora shut him down. Again. But he didn't leave. He stayed in the waiting area, pacing like a man whose plans were falling apart. That night, Nora pulled a chair beside me. I'm going to stay here, she said firmly. You're not alone. Her loyalty, her bravery, her kindness, they began to mend something inside me. Something I thought was too shattered to ever recover. We sat in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that feels like comfort instead of emptiness. Then out of nowhere she spoke softly, almost like a confession. My grandmother went through something similar. She suffered in silence for so long that when she finally asked for help, it was too late. She swallowed hard. I won't let that happen to you. Her words wrapped around my heart like a warm hand. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. Sometimes family isn't the people connected to your blood, but the people brave enough to stand beside you when your own blood betrays you. I closed my eyes, not from weakness, but from a quiet strength building inside me. Because tomorrow I would begin to fight. Not with my hands, not with my voice, but with the truth. And the truth, when spoken by a woman who has survived heartbreak, is stronger than any man's lies. The next morning arrived slowly, like a shy guest hesitant to enter the room, and for the first time in many years, I felt a strange sense of strength rising inside me, quiet, steady, unmistakable. I wasn't healed. I wasn't safe forever. But I was no longer alone. When the sunlight crawled across the floor and touched the side of my bed, Nora was still there, her head resting against her hand, tired but alert. She straightened as soon as she noticed my eyes open. Good morning, Helen, she whispered gently, as if morning itself might break me. But I felt something different today. Yesterday I was a victim. Today I felt like someone who had survived something brutal, and still had breath left to tell the story. Nora adjusted my blankets and checked my pulse. We're meeting with the hospital's legal officer today, she said softly. You're going to tell them everything. And when you can speak again, you'll be able to testify if needed. Testify. The word sounded heavy, sharp, almost frightening. But it also sounded like justice, the kind of justice that old women like me rarely receive after lifetimes of quiet suffering. She squeezed my hand. You deserve to be heard. Hours later, two officials entered the room, one from hospital administration and one from patient advocacy. Nora stood beside me like a shield. They explained my rights, their responsibilities, the steps they could take. They promised protection, legal support, documentation of every threat. Then they asked questions. Carefully, gently, professionally. And with each blink I gave, once for yes, twice for no, I felt myself regaining pieces of my life that someone had tried to take away. I blinked yes when they asked if Martin had been abusive. I blinked yes when they asked if he had threatened me. I blinked yes when they asked if he had planned to benefit from my death. They exchanged a look that told me this was worse than they expected. But I didn't feel shame. Not anymore. I felt relief. Because sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is simply tell the truth, especially when it has been buried under years of silence. Later that afternoon, the hospital issued a protective order. Martin was officially banned from entering the building. His mistress too. When they tried to protest at the front desk, security escorted them off the property. Nora told me everything, staying calm even though anger flickered behind her eyes. They won't come near you again, she said. You're safe now. And this time I believed her. For the first time in decades, I believed someone's promise. My body remained weak, but my heart finally felt like it had the right to breathe. Over the next days, my strength slowly began to return. I moved a finger, then two, then a whole hand. My voice, still fragile, trembled like a newborn bird learning its first sound. When Nora heard me whisper her name, just a broken breathy Nora, tears filled her eyes. You're back, she whispered. You're really back. As my recovery continued, the truth began unraveling even further. The financial officer discovered that Martin had been secretly accessing my accounts, draining money little by little. He forged documents. He altered insurance details. He had built an entire future dependent on my death. But instead of dying, I lived. And in living, I destroyed his carefully crafted empire of lies. The hospital notified the authorities. The investigation began. And for the first time in my long, weary life, I was not the one fighting alone. Others were fighting for me. People I had never met. People who believed I mattered. The day I finally sat up without support, sunlight filled the room with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Nora walked in, smiling, holding a cup of warm tea. "You did it," she said. "You really did it." And as she placed the cup in my trembling hands, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long. The weight of a life I still had the right to live. I realized then that surviving wasn't just something that happened to me, it was something I chose. Even when my body couldn't speak, some part of me refused to let go. Some part of me demanded to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. That evening, as I sat by the window in my wheelchair, looking at the glowing city below, I whispered a simple truth to myself, soft but certain. I am still here. Those 4 words carried 50 years of heartbreak, betrayal, love, loss, and resilience. I thought of Martin, not with hatred, but with the clarity that comes only at the end of a long journey. He had tried to bury me, but he had forgotten something essential. You cannot bury a woman who has already learned to rise from her own ruins. Nora joined me at the window, resting a gentle hand on my shoulder. "What do you want to do now?" she asked. I looked out at the world, breathing in the freedom of a life reclaimed. And with my voice still fragile but full of truth, I whispered, "Live." The days after I found my voice again felt almost unreal, like walking through a world that had been waiting for me to wake up. Every morning the nurses would help me sit by the window, and I would watch people walking outside, people rushing to work, to life, to dreams. I used to be one of them once upon a time, full of plans with a man I thought would grow old beside me. Now, in the quiet of that hospital room, I realized how much of my life I had spent shrinking myself just to keep the peace, whispering my pain so his comfort could stay loud. As I recovered, I noticed that my body was healing faster than my heart. Wounds on skin fade with medicine. Wounds on the soul take truth, courage, and time. And time, that was something I thought I didn't have much of. But every day I opened my eyes, the universe whispered, "Not yet. Your story isn't finished." Martin tried reaching out through phone calls he made to the hospital but were rejected before they even reached my room. He left messages saying he wanted to clear misunderstandings, calling it a family matter. Family matter. The irony stung. He never treated me like family when he was planning my funeral beside another woman. The officials told me I didn't have to respond, and I didn't. Silence became my shield. A quiet refusal to be dragged back into a life where my suffering was normal and his excuses were endless. I didn't owe him a single word. Not after what he'd done. Not after the way he looked at me like my life was an obstacle. Not after he waited for me to die so he could be free. One afternoon, the patient advocate visited me with updates. Martin was being investigated not only for financial fraud but for attempted negligence leading to harm. His lover was involved too. They had built their future on the belief that I would never wake up. And when I did, their entire plan collapsed. The advocate asked if I wanted to press additional charges. For a moment, I felt the old version of myself, the quiet wife who avoided conflict, hesitate. But then I remembered lying there, hearing them plan my absence like it was a scheduled event. I remembered Martin whispering, "You weren't supposed to wake up," and something inside me rose like a tide. I blinked slowly, then spoke with the little strength my voice had regained. "Yes, I want justice." My words weren't loud, but they carried the weight of every year I spent unseen. As the days passed, Nora became more than a nurse to me. She was a companion, a listener, a gentle force pushing me toward a version of myself I had long forgotten. She brought me flowers, books with large print that I could slowly read, and sometimes just sat beside me in silence. Comfortable silence, the kind that grows between people who share something deeper than conversation. She told me stories of her grandmother, of the woman she lost, and why she fights so hard for patients like me. "You're not weak," she told me one night as she helped adjust my pillow. You just loved someone who didn't deserve the softness of your heart. Her words sank into me like medicine no doctor could prescribe. Eventually, after weeks of therapy, I could stand again, shaky at first like a newborn deer finding its legs. The therapist held me from both sides, encouraging me to take just one step, then another. Every small movement felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Every breath felt like a quiet victory. One morning I walked slow, trembling but on my own from the bed to the window. The nurses clapped softly, cheering like I had crossed an ocean. In a way I had. I had crossed through betrayal, fear, silence, and death's shadow, and now I was standing in the morning light, alive in ways I hadn't been in years. But the biggest milestone came the day they told me I could be discharged. I stared at the papers, at the future waiting outside those walls. For the first time in my life, I wasn't returning to a house where I had been abandoned emotionally long before I was abandoned physically. I wasn't returning to Martin, not to his lies, not to his indifference, not to the quiet suffocation of a home without tenderness. I was going somewhere else. A rehabilitation home at first and later wherever my heart felt safe. Leaving the hospital felt like leaving a battlefield. Stepping out with scars but also with victory. Nora hugged me gently, careful of my fragile frame. You deserve a peaceful life, she whispered. A life where someone's love doesn't come with conditions. As they wheeled me out to the car that would take me to the recovery center, I looked back at the hospital building and whispered words I had waited my whole life to say. I choose myself. They were soft, but they filled my chest with warmth. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I would ever love again or even trust again. But I knew this. My story didn't end where Martin wanted it to. It didn't end in a hospital bed or in the shadows of his betrayal. It continued with me breathing on my own, walking on my own, and finally living on my own terms. And as the car drove away, I closed my eyes and felt the sun on my face, the sun of a world where I was finally free. The next morning, sunlight slipped into the room like a shy visitor, touching my face with a warmth I hadn't felt in months, and for a moment I allowed myself to believe that life was giving me another chance. A small chance, but mine. The nurse, my angel in scrubs, walked in quietly with a folder pressed against her chest, her expression serious but determined, and she sat beside me just like she had every day since she realized I could hear and understand everything. Helen, she whispered softly, I have something important to tell you, but I need you to stay calm. Calm. The word had lost its meaning after everything I had heard, but I blinked to tell her I was listening. She opened the folder slowly, and even though I couldn't move my head, I could feel the tension shift in the room, as if the walls themselves were leaning forward to listen. The doctor ran your neurological tests again, she said, and you're recovering faster than anyone expected. The paralysis was temporary. You will speak again. You will move again. My heart didn't beat. It leaped. For the first time since that horrible day when Martin and his lover planned my funeral, I felt a spark of life, powerful and fierce. She touched my hand gently. But there's something else, she added. Last night I overheard your husband outside talking to that woman. They think you won't make it through the weekend. They think they'll get the insurance money soon. Insurance money. So that was it. My life, 40 years of loyalty, of love, of sacrifice, reduced to a number on a paper. I wanted to scream, cry, break something, but all I could do was blink rapidly, and the nurse immediately held my face gently. I know, she whispered. I'm not going to let them hurt you. I've already spoken with hospital administration. We're documenting everything. And when you recover enough to speak, your statement will be taken. For a moment I couldn't breathe, relief, fear, anger, and hope all tangled together in my chest like threads pulled too tight. And then the door opened. Footsteps, slow, rehearsed footsteps. Martin entered first, pretending to look devastated, pretending to be a loving husband worn down by worry. Behind him came the woman, his lover, her eyes darting around like a thief checking for witnesses. The nurse stood up straight, blocking them with her body. You may speak to her for 5 minutes, she said coldly. Then you must leave. Martin forced a sad smile and sat beside my bed, touching my hand as if he owned it. Helen, he whispered. I've been praying for you. Lies, lies dripping from every syllable. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. If anything happens to you, I just want you to know you'll be taken care of. Everything is arranged. All your worries will be gone. I understood exactly what he meant. When you die, everything will be convenient for me. His lover stood behind him, silent but smug, her arms crossed as if she were already the new wife, already living my life, wearing my home, touching my bed. But then something happened. Something unexpected. My right index finger twitched. Not a tremble. Not an accident. A movement. A message. The nurse saw it first. She gasped and rushed to my side, holding my hand, encouraging me softly. Do it again, Helen. Move again. My husband froze. His lover's smile faded. Their eyes widened with fear. Not concern, not love, fear of the truth. Fear that the dead woman they planned to bury was clawing her way back to life. I focused every bit of strength I had left, and my finger twitched again. Small but powerful. The nurse whispered, almost trembling with joy. She's coming back. Martin stepped back so fast the chair behind him fell over, and for the first time I saw real panic in his eyes. Not because he thought I was dying, because he realized I wasn't. Because he knew the truth would rise with me. And suddenly the balance of this story shifted. I was no longer the silent victim lying in a hospital bed. I was a woman coming back to life. A woman who had heard everything. A woman he could no longer bury. And I promised myself, as my finger twitched again, that I would make them face every single thing they tried to hide. The room shifted in a way I could almost feel inside my bones, like the moment before a storm breaks. The air thickened, the silence sharpened, and everyone's breathing suddenly mattered. My finger had moved. Something they never expected. Something they never wanted. And now the truth was cracking through the surface like sunlight through a broken window. The nurse squeezed my hand with pride and relief, whispering encouragement, while Martin stood frozen as though he had seen a ghost rise from the grave he dug himself. His lover slowly backed toward the wall, her eyes shaking, her confidence dissolving into the thin air between us. They weren't looking at me like a dying woman anymore, they were looking at me like a witness who had survived. The nurse straightened her shoulders and said loudly, "Sir, your wife is regaining motor control, and that means she'll soon be able to communicate clearly. The doctors will need to reassess everything." Her voice carried a warning in it, sharp and unmissable. Martin's face drained of color. His lips twitched with the effort to keep pretending, but the mask was slipping, cracking, falling apart piece by piece. "That's wonderful," he managed to say, but I could hear the tremble under the fake joy. His lover grabbed his arm, her voice tight as she whispered, "We need to talk now. Outside." They rushed out of the room so quickly the door slammed against the frame, and the nurse exhaled deeply as if releasing a weight she'd been carrying for days. She leaned close to me and whispered, "They're scared, Helen. That's good. Scared people make mistakes. And we're going to use every one of them." There was a pause, quiet, gentle, before she continued, her voice softer. "I know you're tired. I know this pain, this betrayal. It's bigger than your body can hold right now. But you're stronger than anything they planned for you. You've already fought your way back once. You can do it again." She lifted the bed slightly to help me breathe better, and for a moment my eyes drifted toward the window where the sun was rising, painting the world in soft gold. I had lived a long life, raised children, lost people I loved, cooked meals in a kitchen full of laughter, folded laundry with hands that were once young, kissed a man who once promised forever. And now here I was rebuilding my strength from a single finger. Life is strange. But sometimes the smallest movement becomes the loudest scream. A few minutes later, 2 doctors came in with charts in their hands, and I felt the seriousness in their presence. They performed tests, touching my hands, watching my eyes, asking me to try tiny motions. And each time I tried, something responded. A twitch. A flutter. Flicker. It wasn't much, but it was enough for them to exchange hopeful glances. "She's improving," one doctor said. "We'll begin neurological therapy immediately. There's a very real chance she'll regain full speech and mobility." Those words, they wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket. The room felt brighter. My own body felt less like a cage and more like a home I might be able to return to. The nurse stood proudly beside me, arms crossed, as if she had been waiting for the whole world to finally recognize that I wasn't done yet. But then, just when I allowed myself the luxury of hope, the door swung open again. Martin returned. Alone this time. His eyes were darker, colder, desperate. He walked toward my bed with a stiffness that felt dangerous, and for the first time since the accident, I felt a shiver of fear run up my spine. He leaned forward, his voice low and shaking with anger he tried to hide. "I don't know what you think you're doing," he whispered, "but you need to stop. You're making things difficult, for everyone." Difficult. That word echoed in my mind. I had been his wife for 40 years, given him everything, forgiven more than I should have, and now he called me difficult? He leaned closer, so close I could smell the bitterness on his breath. "If you wake up and start talking, things will get messy. For you. For me. For all of us." For a moment I feared he might hurt me, right there in the hospital room, but before he could get any closer, the nurse stormed in like a shield. "Step away from her," she said fiercely. "Now." Her voice shook the air. And this time Martin listened. He stepped back, jaw clenched, eyes burning with a hatred I had never seen in him before. He left without a word, and the nurse locked the door behind him, her chest rising and falling with fury. She turned to me with gentle eyes and whispered, "You're safe, Helen. Promise. You're safe with me." And for the first time in a long, painful, heartbreaking journey, I believed her. Hours after Martin stormed out felt heavier than anything I had carried in the past 40 years of our marriage, as if the weight of every lie he ever told me had settled on my chest. But this time something inside me was different, stronger, sharper, awake in a way I had never been before. My body was still weak, but my mind was burning with a quiet fire. A fire that refused to let me die silently the way he wanted. The nurse stayed by my side like a guardian, checking my pulse, adjusting my pillow, and keeping the door locked whenever she wasn't inside the room. She told the administration everything, every detail of what she'd overheard. And suddenly the hospital wasn't just a place where I was fighting for my life. It became the first home where someone fought for me. Later that afternoon, a social worker and a security officer entered my room. I watched their faces as they reviewed my chart, listened to the nurse, and observed every small movement I could manage. When the officer leaned close and said softly, "Ma'am, blink if you feel unsafe with your husband." I didn't blink once. I blinked twice, fast and hard, pouring months of silent fear into those two tiny motions. His jaw tightened. He understood. That single moment began a chain of events I never imagined. They added a security note to my file, and for the first time since my marriage began falling apart, someone with authority believed me, without me even needing a voice. But outside my room, I could hear the storm building. Martin was arguing with staff, demanding access to me, pretending to be the grieving, devoted husband. I heard him say phrases like, "I'm her only family, and you're overreacting, and she needs me." But his voice trembled with panic, not love. His lover wasn't with him this time. Maybe she was falling apart. Maybe she was beginning to fear that the life they planned was slipping through their fingers like sand. The nurse entered my room again, her expression tight. "He's losing control," she whispered. "That's good. People like him make mistakes when they panic. Just hold on, Helen. You're doing everything right." I blinked slowly, telling her I understood. Then something unexpected happened. Late in the evening, a doctor I hadn't seen before entered the room with a neurologist and 2 interns. He examined me carefully, my hands, my eyes, my breathing pattern. "Her responsiveness has increased significantly," he said. "Let's try vocal stimulation." He leaned close and said, "Helen, if you can, try to make a sound. Anything." For the first time I tried. I forced air through my throat, pushing against the weakness, pushing against the fear, pushing against every memory of being silenced in my own home. A faint, broken, barely there sound escaped me. More a breath than a voice, but real. The nurse gasped. The neurologist's eyes widened with excitement. "She's regaining control," he said. "This is remarkable progress." And for the first time since the accident, I saw the possibility of speaking, of telling the world everything Martin had tried to hide. But progress also brought a new danger. When the doctor stepped outside the room to update the chart, he nearly collided with Martin in the hallway. I could hear every word through the thin walls. "She's improving?" Martin asked, panic sharpening every syllable. "How fast?" The doctor hesitated. "It's early, but she's regaining motor control and attempted a vocal response." Silence. Then Martin's voice, cold as a knife. "That's surprising." In that moment I knew, He wasn't worried about my health. He was terrified of my truth. He was terrified that his dead wife had chosen not to die. And then, his lover's voice joined him. "What are we going to do?" she hissed, trembling. "What if she talks?" Martin snapped at her. "She won't. Not yet. We'll figure something out." My blood ran cold. Figure something out. That phrase had a darkness to it. A danger I couldn't ignore. The nurse rushed into my room again, locking the door behind her, her face pale. "They're planning something," she whispered. "I can feel it. They know you're coming back, and that scares them." She placed her warm hand on mine. "But I want you to remember this, no matter what they try, you are not alone anymore. We're watching. We're protecting you. And you are stronger than anything they can do now." A single tear slid down my cheek, and she wiped it gently, whispering, "You're going to win this, Helen. You survived their betrayal. Now survive these last steps." As the night settled in and the hallway lights dimmed, I lay there in silence, listening to the distant hum of hospital machines and the soft footsteps of nurses moving through the night shift. My body was still weak, but my soul was standing. And I knew that tomorrow everything would change. The truth was coming, and I was coming with it. Progress also brought a new danger. When the doctor stepped outside the room to update the chart, he nearly collided with Martin in the hallway. I could hear every word through the thin walls. "She's improving?" Martin asked, panic sharpening every syllable. "How fast?" The doctor hesitated. "It's early, but she's regaining motor control," and attempted a vocal response. Silence. Then Martin's voice, cold as a knife. "That's surprising." In that moment I knew, he wasn't worried about my health. He was terrified of my truth. He was terrified that his dead wife had chosen not to die. And then, his lover's voice joined him. "What are we going to do?" she hissed, trembling. "What if she talks?" Martin snapped at her. "She won't. Not yet. We'll figure something out." My blood ran cold. Figure something out. That phrase had a darkness to it. A danger I couldn't ignore. The nurse rushed into my room again, locking the door behind her, her face pale. "They're planning something," she whispered. "I can feel it. They know you're coming back, and that scares them." She placed her warm hand on mine. "But I want you to remember this, no matter what they try, you are not alone anymore. We're watching. We're protecting you. And you are stronger than anything they can do now." A single tear slid down my cheek, and she wiped it gently, whispering, "You're going to win this, Helen. You survived their betrayal. Now survive these last steps." As the night settled in and the hallway lights dimmed, I lay there in silence, listening to the distant hum of hospital machines and the soft footsteps of nurses moving through the night shift. My body was still weak, but my soul was standing. And I knew that tomorrow everything would change. The truth was coming, and I was coming with it. The morning that followed felt different from any other. The air itself seemed to tremble with expectation, as if the world knew something important was about to unfold. I woke to the soft light creeping across my blanket, and for the first time since the accident, my body didn't feel like it belonged to death. I felt present, aware, alive. The nurse entered with a cautious smile, checking the monitors, adjusting my blanket, studying my face with hopeful eyes. "Helen," she whispered gently, "today the police will be coming. We reported everything. Your case is now officially under investigation." My heart tightened, not with fear, but with a bittersweet sense of justice finally stretching its wings. I blinked slowly, telling her I was ready. She squeezed my hand, and I felt the warmth travel through my veins like courage. A few hours later, the hallway filled with unfamiliar footsteps, firm, authoritative steps that made the air shift. 2 detectives and a female officer walked in, their faces professional yet gentle as they greeted me. "Mrs. Carter," the detective said respectfully, "we've received statements from hospital staff. We understand you may have heard things while you were incapacitated." He watched my eyes carefully. "If that's true, blink twice." I didn't hesitate. I blinked twice, slowly, deliberately, and the room went silent for a heartbeat. The officer stepped closer. "We'll keep you safe," she promised softly. "We'll take it from here." But before they could ask more, chaos erupted in the hallway, loud voices, angry shouts, heavy footsteps. "Martin!" He burst in like a man desperate to keep control he no longer had, his face red, his eyes wild, his hands shaking. "Why are the police here?" he barked. "She's my wife, she needs me, not strangers." His lover trailed behind him, crying hysterically, clinging to his sleeve, her voice cracking as she said, "They're going to ruin everything, do something." Everything. That word again. Everything meant their plan. Their house. Their money. Their future built on a grave that never closed. The detectives turned calmly toward him. "Mr. Carter, we have some questions about your wife's condition and your statements regarding her end-of-life decisions." He froze. His lover's hand slipped from his arm, and I watched him as every ounce of confidence drained from his face. He stuttered, tried to form sentences, tried to charm, tried to lie, just like he had done with me for years, but this time the lies crumbled under the weight of witnesses and evidence. The detective continued, "We also received a report that you were discussing funeral arrangements while your wife was still neurologically responsive." Silence swallowed the room. Martin's eyes flicked to me, just for a second, and in that second I saw the truth. He finally realized he had lost. Not because I was strong enough to fight him, but because I was strong enough to survive him. His lover broke first, sobbing, panicking, grabbing his arm. "I'm not going to jail for this," she screamed. "You said she'd die. You said she wasn't coming back." The room went still. The detectives exchanged a sharp glance. Those words, they were a confession. A raw, unfiltered truth spilled from fear. It was over. Security rushed in. The detectives restrained her as she screamed. Martin tried to run, but two officers blocked him. "You're both coming for questioning," the detective said firmly. "You're not to come near her again." As they dragged them out, Martin looked back at me one last time. His face twisted with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. He never imagined this ending. He never imagined the silent woman he planned to bury would rise and bury him instead. And just like that, the door closed. The noise faded. The chaos ended. The nurse rushed to my side, tears filling her eyes. "It's over, Helen," she whispered. "You're safe now." For the first time in months, my chest loosened, my breath came easier, and the weight that had crushed me finally drifted away. Later that afternoon, when the neurologist returned, he placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said, "Let's try again, Helen. Try to speak." I gathered every ounce of strength inside me, every memory, every heartbreak, every moment of survival, and pushed air through my throat. It came out as a broken whisper, fragile and soft, but it was mine. My voice. "Thank you." The room went silent with emotion. The nurse cried. The doctor smiled. And I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of my own tears. I had survived the betrayal of the man I loved, survived death, survived silence, survived the grave they prepared for me. I wasn't just alive, I was living. And I knew deep in the quiet, sacred place inside my soul that this second life, this new beginning belonged only to me.